And we're live. What's up, everybody? Thank you for joining. I took a week or two off for the holidays. It's good to be back. Hope you all had a good holidays for those who celebrate. Hope you had a meaningful Yom Kippur, reflected on some of your sins, and are committed to being the best version of yourself. Whether you're Jewish or not, a Day of Atonement, I feel, is important for us all. Anyways, a lot's happened the past week. A ceasefire deal has been signed. It looks like all the hostages will be home within 72 hours. This is a great something to rejoice in. Let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Because there's a lot of good. There's some not so good, but this is definitely something that should be celebrated. And not everybody is celebrating it. I guess we'll get into why not everybody's celebrating this. But so the good, again, hostages coming home. We have 1,700 or 1,800 Palestinian prisoners coming home. Some of them, I think, could also fall under the category of hostage because they were not charged with a crime. After October 7th, thousands were rounded up. Many have been in prison since, so a lot of them are being released, as well as, I believe the number is 250 who have been sentenced to have blood on their hands. This is very hard for Israeli society to accept, but if it means getting our own back, then we'll do it. Now, it's interesting because Trump, credit where credit's due. He got both parties to sign, but we saw that it really, neither side made a massive concession, right? This is something that likely could have been achieved well over a year ago. There's the deal breaker for both sides. Israel's deal breaker was leaving Hamas in power and withdrawing from Gaza. And Hamas's deal breaker was stepping down from power. Now, this seems like neither side fully gets what they want. Hamas will not be removed from power, which, again, this has been predictable since the beginning. Does that mean they still have a future governing Gaza in the same way? Unclear, but they're not disarming and stepping down. That's not a part of this phase of the ceasefire. And Israel, but they do need to give up their leverage, their primary leverage, which is the living hostages. So they are willing to give that back, even though Israel is not fully withdrawn Gaza. So they've both made some concessions, but they're major ones. There, it's unclear, right? Because will Israel agree to fully withdraw, or will they just get the hostages back and then find a way to continue fighting? That very well may be the case. Now, part of the ceasefire agreement is the fact that Israel cannot continue fighting, and there's international guarantees that they won't continue. How do you actually guarantee it? I'm not sure. I guess time will tell. What we might see is, I want to be optimistic and say this is amazing. And what I can say with fairly high degree of confidence is people are going to be reunited with their families on both sides. Lots of very joyous moments of people who have been separated for their families now for years will be reunited. This is something beautiful. The future of Gaza still very much is uncertain. The bloodshed will be reduced for the short term in the next month or two, but in the next few years, will the bloodshed in Gaza be reduced? I very much hope it is. I don't know how confident I am for two reasons. One is, will Israel be okay fully withdrawing from Gaza, leaving Hamas intact? Unclear and perhaps unlikely. They very well may look for more reason to continue aggression. Two is just a power vacuum that has been created in Gaza, which there's going to be armed parties vying for control, fighting for control. We're almost certainly going to see some amount of bloodshed between Gazans fighting amongst themselves. This is something that's not spoken of much, but I think we could predict that there's a pretty good chance this will happen. and just rebuilding and getting Gaza back to normal living conditions is going to take many years. So it's definitely a step in the right direction. Should we fully be cheering? I'm not. I don't think quite yet. I think we should be hopeful, but not overly optimistic. I think is fair. And again, without a vision for actual peace, then we should take this victory, but we should recognize that the status quo is always going to produce more violence. So we need to take this ceasefire and build on it and work towards long-term peace and really solve the conflict in a just way. Is there vision? Is there a plan to do this? Not that we can tell, or none that we can tell. Hopefully there is, but let's try to build back better, right? Let's try to take the past 2 years of death and destruction, immense trauma, economic toll, reputational harm, just the cost that the individuals have paid for the past 2 years of bloodshed. Let's not let that be in vain and have this be an opportunity to really create a better situation on the ground, a status quo that is not inherently immoral and a status quo that will not continuously produce results of violence. So that is my hope. Yet I can't say I'm super optimistic just because we really lack the leadership. But who knows? Maybe Trump really wants that Nobel Peace Prize and he'll need a build on this. Because first of all, I don't think he's going to get it just because he's too controversial of a figure. But a ceasefire in Gaza is not peace. It's not peace if there's still a brutal military occupation in the West Bank and Gaza is under siege, right? Peace is actual peace. So this is good, and he deserves credit for making this happen. Would Kamala have done this? I don't know. Hard to say. Probably not, though. But this isn't true peace. It's just a cessation of. Hold on. Let me just. There we go. I see we have Shervin here. Shervin, good to see you. And I realized I didn't get back to you. I've been offline, but I'm happy you tuned in because you asked me about this specifically. Good to see you here. And regarding your question about, we might as well just catch up here now that you're in chat. But somebody in NYC open a hosting. I would post in the giraffes channel, the New York giraffe channel. Now that we cleared that out of the way, sending you lots of love. Anyways, let's see what we have going in the comments. Omar and Natan, good to see you here on the Discord. Awesome. Emperor Ghidorah, good to see you here, is saying, I'm predicting Israel will ruin the ceasefire. And continues and says, Hamas has already agreed to step down. They've said they would in January, but I've heard others say that Hamas would step down long before January. So it depends what you mean. Step down from governance. So from like civil control, yes, but not disarm. So they wanted to kind of play the role Hezbollah plays in Lebanon, be a Gazan militant group, but not a political arm. So it's essentially stepping down or dismantling the political wing of Hamas, but not their military wing. This doesn't do anything for Israel. This isn't appealing, though perhaps it should be, right? Let's say the PA and Hamas merge in Gaza. PA does civil governance. Can this contribute to the evolution and reformation of Hamas? Sure. So I don't think that's should be seen as nothing, but it's not the disarmament. It doesn't ensure that rockets can't be shot or that another October 7th doesn't happen. Though Hamas being removed from power doesn't ensure that either, because there's other armed militias and gangs there that might take up arms against Israel. Again, until there's a solution, there'll be violence. The boss says, if there were a permanent end to the war, wouldn't Smotrich, Ben Gvir and Smotrich collapse the coalition, or do they have less leverage than they let on? Yeah, so that's interesting. What's the internal conversation happening? It's possible Netanyahu gave them some guarantee that we're going to continue. He might be playing them. Maybe he secured more coalition partners. It's unclear. It's unclear. So yeah, boss says that they conditioned disarmament on Palestinian statehood. Yeah, I mean, so this is something I've been saying, that if Israel wants to get them to disarm, the best way to get them to do that is to actually commit to a Palestinian state, right? Give them the victory that allows them to, motivates them to disarm. But did they explicitly say that, the boss? Anyways, let's see what else we got. Shervin, you're saying Kamala would not have gotten a ceasefire deal. Okay. Are you happy with Trump's performance all in all? How you feeling about that? By the way, guys, I think I'm gonna start doing less debates and start doing a slightly different Socratic method style of conversation. The debates are fun. I find them enjoyable. People like them, but I think it could be interesting to not just try to have a debate is even though the debates on this channel, they're more just like conversations. The goal is still for each side to like have the better arguments. I think what I'm going to start doing more of is asking questions to try to get to the bottom of people's beliefs and trying to help them maybe see things differently, simply by asking good questions. I think we'll do a few trial runs of this and see how it goes. And I'm shout out, I'm inspired by two people. One is my co-founder and friend Adam. He's great at asking questions, and another person who asks questions in a very interesting and unique, thought-provoking way is a community member, Shadow Disc. And I think they're onto something with how they do that. So we're gonna do that more, hopefully. So, for example, somebody says, I don't support two states. Why? Right? Like you often hear one state, two states, right? But we don't get to the bottom. Like, why are Israelis now in opposition to two states? You could reach many conclusions for seeing that opposition, but do you know, is it rooted in some religious ideology, nationalist ideology, some security concern? Right? How strong is it? How strong are people's beliefs? How easily can they be changed? If we don't know what drives a belief, we're in no position to do anything about it, right? And I think we often, this is something we talk about on this channel a lot, but people often look at somebody's views and beliefs and they make conclusions about them and their society based on those beliefs. Very, very rarely are people trying to understand how an innocent child who has no beliefs, grows up to an adult that can have beliefs that are harmful, dangerous, or hateful, right? Understanding that is essential to actually changing the world in a positive direction, not just being reactive towards views you don't like, right? So much of our political discourse is being reactive to views we don't like rather than understanding how one arrives at those views. So I think we definitely need more of that. Let's see what else we got. I saw that Coleman Hughes and Dave Smith did a debate. People wanted me to review that maybe sometime next week. We'll do that sometime next week. By the way, Ghidorah, are you still here? If so, I have a question for you, Emperor Ghidorah. Trump saying Trump has made, or Shervin is saying Trump has made a series of great decisions for the U.S. In my opinion, Kamala Biden or anyone on the other side would never be able to do them. But do I like him as a person? Not really. Okay, I'd be interested in hearing more from you. What great things you think he's done for the U.S. Admittedly, I don't follow it deeply, but it seems like there's some kind of there's been a little bit of an erosion of free speech with arresting college protesters, rounding up thousands of people and locking them up without due process in El Salvador prison. I mean, that's pretty problematic. What else? I don't know. I'm not following Trump too much, but you know who we should get on soon? Kaizen. So I don't know if you all know Kaizen. He's an up and coming thought leader and influencer. He's often retweeted by Elon Musk. He's a friend of ours, of Shervin and myself. We should get him on for a conversation. So I imagine he's still a Trump supporter, but he's very nuanced and balanced in how he approaches it. We could have a good conversation. And honestly, maybe we host him for. Actually, he'd be good for that Socratic style of question asking. So maybe we'll bring him on for that, or I'll moderate a debate between him and some anti-Trumper. Maybe Shael would want to do that. Shael and Kazan, that could be an interesting one. Yeah, Shervin, we knew Kaizen before he blew up. We knew him back when he wasn't even doing any thought leadership. But good for him. He deserves it. You know, that's the kind of better be people like Kaizen as a leader than someone like Andrew Tate. You know, just a man with agree or disagree. It doesn't matter. He's just a man with integrity. He has like a clear moral code. He's respectful. These are the people we should look up to. I was actually thinking about that the other day. Who's a good leader today? Who's a good role model, right? Like Andrew Tate showed us a problem in society that there's a lacking of good male role models. And I don't know. And in a healthy society, Andrew Tate would not be relevant. Like people would just clearly be able to see that he's deficient in many areas of virtue, let's say, just not a great person, not somebody you should look up to. If I want to get into details, I mean, he seemed, whatever, we don't even need to get into it. If one of the viewers is a Tate supporter, I'm happy to get into, but I think there's general agreement that he's just not a good person. But I was asking myself, who is, and I don't know. I'm not sure. Like Mr. Beast, in a way, I could see that because he's like a go-getter, he's successful, but he's a little hyper focused on consumerism and money. And he's like selling chocolate to children, right? Like that. We need less sugar, not more sugar. So he's a mixed bag, but he's not a piece of shit, you know? Like you can't say that about him. He seems to, well, I don't know. I could see him being a sociopath who just focuses on philanthropy because it's good for growth, perhaps. But I think he's net positive for the world. And then you have like I Show Speed, who I always see clips of. Like I don't watch streamers, but I always see clips of his popping up. And that's somebody that's like an example of who should be famous. Right. I don't think he acts as a leader, but I think he's inspiring to people and he's a sweetheart and he goes around giving people money. I think like these are the people that we should prop up. Not like the whole red pill movement that are just angry at life and think that demeaning women is manly and who don't know the value in introspection and acknowledging wrongdoing and compassion and all these virtues that society can benefit from are not prevalent in what's known as is it the red pill? What's the the red pill movement is like the Trump movement, but what's the movement of like incel adjacent. Is that also the red pill, or is that the black pill movement? I keep forgetting. What movement are we part of, huh? What's our movement, people? Yep, David, I'm back. Good to be back. Black pill movement is a subculture primarily associated with incels who believe their inability to form romantic relationships is largely due to their perceived unattractiveness and societal structures that favor certain men. This ideology promotes fatalistic views, suggesting that change is impossible and often, okay, so maybe the black pill movement. David Pendrive, yep, back. Good to be back. Good to see you here. Ahmed, right? Am I pronouncing that right? Is Ahmed? Is that Ahmed? I don't know the how to translate the numbers into Arabic letters. Ahmed says, believing Israel is like believing devil. Look at South Lebanon. Israel is bombing whenever they want. For Israel, for a ceasefire, it's only from one side. Yeah, I think you bring up legitimate concern that this might not really be a ceasefire. It might end quite quickly. Ahmed continues and says, Israel is more isolated now than ever. October 7th actually reached all goals. Yeah. Well, it's hard to know exactly all the goals of Hamas, but in terms of getting prisoners released and putting the Palestinian cause at the forefront of our collective consciousness and isolating Israel, I mean, it was very successful in that. And depending on how you look at things, right? This is a call it an ideological debate that many have. It's sacrificing people for a cause, right? And this is actually something Hamas, their supporters, Israel and their supporters have in common, that they believe that the mass killing of civilians can be justified if you believe it will get us to some greater goal. And this, for all of existence, people have been making these calculations and considerations and deciding, yeah, we're going to mass kill humans. So if you don't care about Palestinian lives as much as you care about Palestine and the movement for a liberated Palestine, then this sacrifice of 100,000 or so Palestinian civilians was worth it, right? If that's how you view things. But if you value human rights and human life over some other goal, then it's going to be very, very hard to see this as legitimate. My take on it is generally, and maybe I don't talk about this enough because it's very easy to talk about all the bad happening in Gaza, but why is it bad, right? Like we reflexively we're averse to killing. Humans don't like death, right? No one wants to see loved ones die. So a lot of the response against the killing in Gaza is just dead people. That's bad. But for me, it's not really driven just from that reaction to people being killed, that there's something deeper there. So the core value I like to root my is it a core value, or let's call it a core value for now, that I think we need to anchor our activism into some greater goal, right? So what is it that we value? For me, it's human flourishing. If I'm going to try to do good for the world, then it'll be to contribute to human flourishing. I think that's just, we all want to flourish. I want to flourish. I want to see my loved ones flourishing. So why not help contribute to human flourishing? Now, human flourishing does not tell you if you should value individual rights over collective rights. What's more important, the rights of a collective or the rights of individuals? Now, this is a debate. It's a debate of I forgot the word for belief in collectivism over individualism. Now, in a sense, if I'm valuing human flourishing, right, as a collective, in a sense, I think we should value the collective. But I happen to think the best way to achieve that is by having strong protection and understanding of individual human rights. I think it's all too easy to justify and rationalize harming people for some greater goal. The problem is you never know if you're going to achieve your greater goal, but you know you're going to harm people. So you're ensuring harming people for an uncertain end result. And I think that's just a very slippery slope if we believe it's okay based on our opinion or perspective to violate people's rights because we believe that it'll create a better world. That opens the door for mass death and destruction. If we really look at the cause for a lot of the times where people have been genocided or just mass killed, those carrying out the killing have often believed that this is necessary to create a better world, right? It's always rooted in some form of altruism for our people or some positive for our people. We're doing this to create a better world. We're doing this to protect me and my family. And that's just a very dangerous way to approach life, especially as our weapons become more powerful. So trying to achieve human flourishing by ensuring very strong individual rights, I think is probably the best way to achieve it. But if you push me on this and say, okay, what if you were to know that giving everybody strong individual rights will lead to the end of humanity? Well, then I would, like, if we can know that for certain, then I wouldn't support individual rights for the sake of supporting them. I would support whatever I believed would help humanity survive and flourish. So my strongest value is not individual rights. To me, that's just a means to an end. It's one of the best ways I think we can to improve human flourishing, amongst other things like just better education system, better food, changing the political and economic system so it's not as competitive, and so we're not in this hyper consumerism society that's killing us all. There's a lot of things we could do to change to improve human flourishing, but when it comes to the topics we often talk about, generally that touches on the one of human rights, which I think is essential to try and protect and preserve for people. So back to what we're saying. So yeah, killing all these people to try to defeat Hamas is a violation of human rights to try to achieve a greater goal. That goal, again, will almost certainly not be achieved. And sacrificing all these Palestinians to liberate Palestine, again, will that one day achieve the goal of liberating Palestine? Perhaps. But in order to justify killing people for a greater goal, you need to prove that there's no other ways to achieve it. So there'll be people on both sides claiming victory, saying we won, saying we needed military force to do this. Don't let people take that win. Make them prove why there's no other way to achieve those goals. You need to make the case, not that there was some benefit to the past 2 years. That we can find benefits. You need to make the case that there was no less violent way to achieve those goals. That's the case that needs to be made. And all the goals that were achieved almost certainly could have been achieved with far less death and destruction. So any amount of death and destruction in excess to what is needed to achieve goals is, in simple terms, just an unjustified violation of human rights and not something that we should accept as a society. Let's see what we got here. Ahmed says there's a major factor you're kind of missing, I guess. Palestinians were nothing but a people resisting an occupation, yet there was many questions on October 7th. Questions on October 7th morning idea for response. I'm not sure what you're saying, Ahmed. Like, are you saying you think it was an October 7th was an inside job? Ahmed saying Algerians gained independence after millions of death. Yet now we're sure Netanyahu sacrificed Israelis to justify the genocide. Yeah, but no. So again, so you're pointing to an example of killing and how a goal was achieved. But in order, at least to compel me, and I hope to most others, you need to prove that there's no other way to achieve that goal. Was that the only way to do it? Perhaps, but that's not the fate we should look at for Palestinians. Palestinians don't just sacrifice themselves by hundreds of thousands to achieve their goals. It takes a very serious lack of creativity to think that that's the only way to do it. The same way it's a serious lack of creativity to think that the only way to deal with Hamas is what Israel just did in Gaza, right? That's not the conclusion we should reach. There's clearly other ways to achieve goals. Yuri's saying someone investigated Mr. Beast and found out he donates like 0.01% of his earnings a year, yet gambles for hundreds of millions. Yeah, okay. I mean, that doesn't surprise me. There's been some sketchy things said about, discovered about him. Let's see what else we got here. Ahmed says, no way IDF wouldn't know about October 7th, yet IDF was absent for 6 hours, then coming using Hannibal Directive. So I did a full review of this and my thoughts on if it was an inside job or not. I'm not going to do the full breakdown again, but just in short, Israel didn't have intel that there may be an attack. They just didn't expect the scale. So to say they didn't know about it isn't true. They did know about it. They just thought, here's the thing we need to understand about intel. You get intel reports all the time. So such attacks, hostage taking attempts, these reports are coming in all the time. So there was some information about an imminent attack that Israel just did not think it would be at this scale, and they thought they have the security in place to deal with it if it happens. In order for this to be a conspiracy, you would really need a lot of people to be involved on different levels of command, to be given very hard to understand orders that they would be talking about. Is it possible that Netanyahu saw benefit of there being an attack in order to unify the country? So let's give a hypothetical. Netanyahu thought there's intel there might be an attack. He said, you know what, let them try. Maybe they'll be a little successful. It'll help unify the country. My poll numbers will go up. I'm going to turn a blind eye to this intel. Is that possible? Sure. But for Netanyahu to then pick up the phone and say, okay, get down XYZ, put this down the chain of commands, that's just a very different claim that requires much more evidence than we have. And it's something that's unlikely to happen just because of the amount of people that would need to be involved. You're not going to get buy-in from Israelis knowingly letting their own people get slaughtered. That's just not something that's going to happen. There are unanswered questions, which we hopefully there will be a proper investigation now. But a lot of the things that people point to as proof, if you actually think of them, you see that that's not proof of an inside job. So let me give you an example. We often hear that, why did 2 battalions move from the Gaza border to the West Bank a week before October 7th? Clear, that's suspicious, right? Well, no, not really. There was tension in the West Bank. Israel moved brigades, and that's why Hamas attacked just then. If the border was filled with troops, they would have waited for a quieter time. So the timing of the attack was opportunistic, and re- related directly to the number of troops on the border. Another one, we hear that there's an interview of IDF saying we were told at 4 a.m. to not do our patrol that morning. We want to know why. Well, that also makes sense. They thought there might be an attack. If you think there might be an attack, you actually don't want patrols on the border. They're sitting ducks. They're the easiest targets for attacks. So I actually called the patrol, and that's them. That was the precaution they took. They said, okay, we'll take some minor precaution. We won't have our patrol be out sitting duck. There's a logical explanation to that. Another one we often hear is like the not being there for 6 hours. So that I want to actually better understand the full thing. There was just mass chaos. They were overwhelmed. They had troops in different areas. It's not that there was no military presence for 6 hours, but it's true that there was a collapse, a breakdown between the command with the Air Force and people on the ground. And that's where a lot of the Hannibal came from, or just the mass use of heavy firepower on the Gaza border. They just complete chaos. They said, okay, let her rip. But exactly what happened, right? If it's as simple as saying, guys, we have thousands of people infiltrating and I'm asking you to stand down, somebody's going to talk about that. We're gonna get answers. I think we're going to see it more like a result of arrogance, believing that we are strong enough to defend ourselves, and then incompetence, just not being well enough prepared. Ahmed says, my friend, I'm a military man. No cash can disturb an army full equipped. Well, that's not true. I mean, I served in the IDF, so not that is why you should believe me. You appeal to your own authority. So let me appeal to my own authority, which is serving in the same military I'm talking about. The IDF is very well equipped, but also disorganized. We're not strong logistically. Logistically, we function like the developing world. The amount of disorganized shit in the IDF, it's a joke. It doesn't even present itself like a serious military when you're actually in it. So to have thousands of armed militants cross the border, to have your bases overrun, to have most of your troops in the West Bank, and to then just fail at responding to that in a timely manner, to me, that sounds more plausible than them saying, okay, guys, we're being infiltrated. We're not going to do anything about it. Like, how do you justify that command down the chain of commands? You know? Someone's saying it's a TikTok army. Can Israel be trusted to tell the truth about October 7th now, David asks? That's a good question. I mean, I don't think Israel's ever going to talk about how many were actually killed from Israeli fire. I don't think that's something that the Israel public is not so interested in knowing, and B, why? Because there's no interest from the Israeli public. Why would Israel investigate and talk about it? Who knows? Maybe they will. They did put out a report on the amount of firepower used from the Air Force. So, and they did admit to blowing up 70 cars driving back into Gaza. Some or many are presumed to have had hostages in them. But I don't think we're going to get an honest investigation in that. I think there will be an honest investigation into the failures. Yeah. And that's not just something that Netanyahu himself can decide on the result of the investigation, right? If there's an investigation and he's somehow complicit, the investigation should say that. I don't think he has control over the results of the investigation. But so, David, in the sense of can they be trusted? I mean, no. Israel, in general, don't trust governments, especially on things that there's an incentive to lie about. But in terms of an incentive to lie about the failures of October 7th, I'm not sure what the incentive there is. Uh, the Israeli public want answers, right? So the, we're we're demanding to understand what went wrong. They're going to need to come up with some response for that. There's only so much you could really wiggle that or frame that differently from what it is. But who knows? I mean, I guess we'll see. You know, it's interesting. I literally I have a cat. I don't have, as far as I know, I don't have cat allergies. But whenever I'm streaming and my cat's here, I get an itchy nose. So I'm not allergic to cats. I'm definitely not allergic to streaming. But the combination, for whatever reason, fucks me up. So if you see me wiping my nose, it's not a cocaine binge. It's I guess my cat. Um, let's see. Zent, what did you share here? Yes, Zent, did you hear I just commented on this? Did you send this? So this was the soldier saying we were told not to patrol a few hours before. I think that has a very easy explanation. They had they had intel that there may be an attack. They didn't predict the scale, but they knew that there was a chance for an attack. And patrols are just sitting ducks. A patrol car on the border is the easiest target for an attack. So it actually makes sense that you're going to pull back patrols if there's a high risk of there being some kind of an infiltration. You could see that you can see that explained from a purely military justification. Um, and for those who are new here, first of all, if you're new here, subscribe. Second, it's not like I put out the leading analysis that I believe Bibus was killed in an IDF airstrike. So it's not that I don't think Israel is capable of lying. I just think that the lie needs to make sense. It needs to be small enough number of people in on it, easy enough to get away with. So there are certainly. I'm not just being protective of Israel for the sake of it. I just don't. Just doesn't. The evidence isn't there. The incentive isn't there. Um, Go place says stress and nervousness increases sensitivity to these things. Interesting. I don't think I get more stressed or nervous on streams though. Certainly not a stream like this. Why were the female spotters not equipped with guns to defend themselves, or were they? I'm not sure. Do Tatspitaniot have guns? No, I don't think they do. They weren't armed unless because it's the Gaza border they are armed, but the ones in the West Bank from my time were unarmed. Um, and even if they had guns, it was too many people. That there was just the border was overwhelmed. You had the Israel Special Forces. A friend's brother was killed on October 7th. He's part of Sayeret Matkal, which is, I guess, the equivalent to it's like the Israeli Delta Force. They were they responded in the kibbutzim relatively quickly. They were airdropped in, and a lot of them were killed because they ran out of ammo. They were just overwhelmed. There were just too many of them. They weren't out trained. Like this is one of the best trained units in the entire world. But they were just outnumbered by a lot. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, not 10. I see you tag me, but I just
Just واخد
I responded to this. This was the guy saying I was told not to patrol in the morning. The most conspiratorial we can get here is some high level players who could have done more to stop it, turning a blind eye because they saw some political benefit to it happening. Granted, if that's the case, I don't think they would have expected the sheer scale of it. They probably thought it would be something much more minor, and they turned a blind eye. That's possible, right? But the whole, making sure there will be no military, making sure Nova's there. Yeah, I don't think so, guys. Um, Anyways, let's move on beyond this. Hopefully, we get more information soon enough. Hopefully. David Pendre says, do hostage families know which hostages are alive? Yes, so Hamas actually released a list of the living hostages that are meant to be released, which you need to think how, these 20 families are going to be reunited, and we'll get to see videos of their reunion, and beautiful and heartwarming. But you need to think that those who have now gotten confirmation that their loved ones are not alive, they're finally discovering, that their loved one have been killed, and they don't get to have that same celebration and reunion. With that, though, at least they can have closure. Maybe not full closure. The bodies have not been returned, but the thought of not knowing if your loved one is alive or dead doesn't allow you to fully mourn them or heal from, the loss. You staying up at night not knowing if they're in some tunnel suffering or what's going on with them. So at the very least, it could provide some closure. At the very least. GoPlay says, yeah, I understand. I just expect all military to have guns, but what do I know? I don't know how other militaries work, but actually in Israel, up until the 20 something, 2010, no, was it before or after my time? Maybe 2005. Everybody had a gun, no matter what your position. But eventually they said there's no reason for some secretary or some office job to carry a gun, so they only have it be combat. And I don't know if that's unique. Jeff Hurst says, just saying hi and sending love tall. Sending love back. Good to see you here, Jeff. Do you think most were killed by airstrikes, and will Israel be honest about that? No, I don't think most killed on October 7th were killed by airstrikes. I mean, we have no shortage of footage of Hamas actually massacring people. I've always put the plausible range at a few dozen to 100, 150 people killed by hellfire and tank fire. And in fact, I mean, one way is if it was the majority, it would take much longer for them to identify bodies. Bodies hit by hellfire missiles. Well, I guess it depends how directly it's hit, but it takes weeks to identify a body that's burnt that badly. But that's also one of the clues we have that there were some 100 plus, potentially 100 plus killed, because there was, I think, 100 or 150 names that it took months for them to be identified. And either they were found in some field and it took time to find them, or they were just They had no dental records, there were burnt that DNA extraction was hard, and it took weeks to months to identify them. West Banker is asking, do you think Gaza will face the same fate as West Bank? I don't think it's. No, I think it's probably going to look different. I don't think there's a high chance of settlement building in Gaza. So that whole dynamic of settlement expansion, settler violence, checkpoints, I don't think that's what Gazans are going to be dealing with. I think it's more so just no institutions, partially functioning healthcare system, mass unemployment, economic ruin, mass homelessness, and then infighting. And again, there very well may be more airstrikes in the future. It's not so obvious that it's over. Ahmed says, Israel's one mistake. They carried on with this genocide. If they only bombed a few days, then tried other methods, the world would still be standing with Israel so hardly. Yeah, I mean, Israel definitely could have dealt this in a very different way that not only would kill less people, but also have them a lot more support around the world. Jeff asks, how can they realistically recover as a society? Yeah, good question. I mean, humans are resilient and recovered from all sorts of horrors. So I think history tells us it's possible, but the trauma is going to be immense, and there will certainly be challenges. But if humans are nothing else, we're resilient, very resilient. Oh, David says, yeah, honest question was, were the dead hostages likely killed by airstrikes, and will Israel be honest about that? Well, Israel has admitted to killing, I think, 14 in airstrikes already. These are generally instances where they lost plausible deniability. So soldiers found the bodies in various states, meaning they're soldiers who have information into the cause of death. It's much harder to keep a secret or give a different cause of death than what is visible to the soldiers who find these bodies. Or if the family members ask for an autopsy. So Israel's admitted to killing 14, but notice that if there's no pressure on Israel to say how they died, they just say they were killed by Hamas. They don't give the cause of death. Pay attention to this. They didn't give a single cause of death for any hostage. Well, some admitted were killed by the IDF. The rest they say killed by Hamas. Only the Bibas children, they said, killed with their bare hands. That's out of all the hostages, the only ones they gave specifics. It's almost as if it was more politicized and seen as different than these other hostages. Why do they feel the need to talk about the cause of death there and not the others? It's interesting. It's a very inconsistent in their approach, and is a sign of at least something. Now, they never said how Shiri Bibas was killed, which is interesting. And there were 7 other bodies released in that hostage exchange, 7, and they just said killed by Hamas. Why didn't they get into the cause of death? Now, the most likely cause of death in Gaza, if you're a hostage, is an airstrike. So unless we get information telling us otherwise, our default assumption should be airstrike. Hamas has an incentive to keep them alive. They're more valuable alive than they are dead. The reason Hamas would kill hostages is the IDF is moving in on them. they don't want them to be recovered alive, so they kill them. This seems to be the case with Hirsch, Carmel, and 2 others who seem to have been executed as the IDF was moving in. Another can be they're old and they're sick and they're not doing well, and then they're executed. I could potentially see that happening, but Hamas has an incentive to keep them alive. So I would say the most likely cause of death by far for any hostage would be airstrike. Second would be an injury sustained on October 7th. So not only were dead bodies brought in already, so some just weren't killed in Gaza. Others very well may have had life-threatening injuries and then died over the next few days. Executions, I would say, is the third most likely, and then things like malnutrition, starvation, disease. So we won't know for sure. I don't think Israel is going to give us the info on this specifically, but I think that's the order in terms of likelihood. All right, I got to wrap it up in like 10 minutes. I have a call. So Ahmed, you're saying, honestly, we all know Biba's family were dead by Israeli raid. Hamas announced on the very same day. Yeah, but the problem with this is you're relying on believing Hamas, right? So if your call it epistemological framework is I don't believe Israel or Hamas, then just saying we know they were killed because Hamas said so, that's not compelling enough to most people, right? Just because Hamas said so. So I believe Bibas was killed in an airstrike, not because Hamas said so. That actually does not play into my calculation, simply because the evidence of that being the most likely cause of death is overwhelming. And also, when it comes to, I put out the analysis that the day after the autopsy, and I was, let's say, over 80% sure that that is the cause of death. Proving that they were killed with their bare hands is very simple. If that's what was shown in forensics, confirm that with any independent third-party forensics department, human rights organization, the UN. I mean, there's many international bodies and hundreds of forensics departments around the world that could confirm an autopsy report. None of this happened. Daniel Hagari, IDF spokesperson, said, "We're sending this to our allies in the West to confirm our report," which doesn't mean anything. Allies in the West will confirm a report if it's for their ally. Even that didn't happen. So he made the claim, and then no one confirmed the autopsy report, not the US, not UK, which is interesting. And not even Israeli forensics confirmed that this was the cause of death. It was only Netanyahu and the IDF spokesperson making the claim. It was not confirmed, at least not publicly, by forensics. So it's very, very easy to prove that that was the cause of death. Send it to someone, prove it. It's such low-hanging fruit. The fact they didn't do it, I think, tells us all we need to know. ITS says, what if Hamas didn't hold them? Other group. Well, Hamas didn't hold them. They were held by the Palestinian Mujahideen or something like that. Different group. Yeah. Sparklelove, good to see you here. Sparklelove is asking, what do you think about the Qatar deal to put an Air Force base in Idaho? I actually did not hear anything about this. I don't mind it. I don't. What's the risk? What's the risk in that? I think it's better to build ties with countries like Qatar. We don't need to love them. We don't need to love their record on human rights to understand that it's better to probably be in cooperation with them. I don't think the base is meaningful or helpful, but I'm not intimidated by it. But if you have other perspective, I'd be interested in hearing. But it's interesting how Qatar became the boogeyman. Now everything's like Qatari propaganda, Qatari sponsored this, Qatari that. It kind of became, you have the anti-Semites blaming the Jews for their influence and control, and kind of now the pro-Israel camp has adopted a similar approach, but they don't blame the Jew, they blame Qatar. Interesting approach. David's saying, I wonder if international journalists get to enter Gaza soon. Yeah, that's a good question. I saw somebody say that they're not planning on letting them in, so I guess I guess it's unclear. Guess we'll see. Ahmed says, and my friend, please don't mix Jews with the Zionists. That's a whole different matter. Well, I do agree that that's a can of worms of its own that we're not going to have time to address now, but we could talk about it. Most Jews are Zionists, though. It's just what you believe to be a Zionist is not what they believe to be a Zionist. It's one term that has different definitions. So I personally reject the usage of the term. Like, why would I use a term that provides no utility and only creates confusion? What am I, dumb? What am I, bored? Come on, guys. Got better use of time to be fucking terminologying it about Zionism with people. But we could go deeper into the concept of who should be blamed, Zionists or Jews. Generally, short answer is don't blame Jews. Focus on individuals, not collectives. I think it's generally a better approach. Ahmed says, if Palestine is free, you really expect peace in the region. I don't know. We're inching closer. I mean, the Middle East is more unified than it's been. Iran and UAE are starting to buddy up to one another. That's positive. Al-Shara, if he's able to maintain control, is trying to open up Syria to the West and do things diplomatically. Abraham Accord speaks to some greater unification. I mean, there needs to be some Shia Sunni peacemaking. Like, it's not, the problem is not just Israel Palestine, right? There's a Shia Sunni struggle that's been going on for thousands of years that I don't know anything about, but I understand that it's an actual there's an actual grievance both people have with each other that needs to be resolved. In fact, somebody made a joke. I don't know if it's true, but he said, it was a Palestinian friend who said, my mom would rather me marry a Jew than a Shia, which I thought was wild. Sounds like an exaggeration, but who knows? Actually, let's ask West Banker. We have you here. What do you say? What's worse, marrying a Jew or a Shia? Like, in not. I'm interested in your personal opinion, but generally speaking, Palestinian society. There's no way Shia is worse than marrying a Jew, right? You've been in conflict with the Jews for so long. Well, I guess you've been in. Yeah, you see, Ahmed, even your a little tribalism coming out right there, buddy. You're saying true Shia have some weird things, by the way. Yeah, I'm sure they say the same about you. Kittens are us. Good to see you here. But that's a cool debate topic that we've never hosted here. Shia Sunni debate. We have a Shia we have some Shias in the head-on community. We could put something together. Soap with Prize says, any further chatter about speaking with Noam Dorman, who, by the way, is looking at suggestion for Palestinians to have on? Yeah, I spoke to Noam, actually. So he is down. He's down to have me on, but he does primarily in-person interviews, so I just need to wait till I'm in New York next. But yeah, we spoke. But maybe in the meantime, I should have him on. What do y'all say? We bring them. We bring Noam on for a little discussion. I'd be down for that. Shervin says, don't Jews only marry amongst themselves, especially in Israel? Yeah, I mean, not only, but primarily. I think like most small tribal groups, There's an expectation of marrying within. Um, in the U.S., less, right? 50% of Jews in the U.S. are Reform, and there's a very high rate of intermarrying. Israel, just a numbers game. If 80% of the population in Israel is Jewish, most likely you're going to marry a Jew. Put aside familial pressure and cultural preferences and whatnot. Just the fact that it's primarily Jews, you're going to have, mainly Jews marrying Jews. But yeah, there's not much intermarrying in Israel. Although I do think that's one of the ways to building a shared future, right? Having some mixed children, right? Imagine you get to a situation where 20% of people living between the river and the sea are Israeli Palestinian mixed. Like, what do you even have to fight about anymore? Although that didn't work for the Neanderthals, did it? White people are like 1% to 3% Neanderthal. That's pretty cool. Got that Neanderthal blood running through our veins. And Asians have Denisovan, around 1% Denisovan DNA. Fascinating. We ain't pure. But did we get that 3% through cooperation and coexistence, or raids and rape? Probably my guess would be both, right? Really speaks to humanity, immense capacity for cooperation, immense capacity for rape. Yeah, that sounds right about human. Sounds right about human. Druze are not allowed to marry outside their religion. Yeah, Druze is another example. Like Druze, it's even stricter to marry somebody else. We once had an active community member in the Soha community who she was dating a Druze guy, and his family disowned him because he was dating a Jew. So yeah, and he served in the IDF. Like this doesn't come from an anti-Zionist, anti-Jewish perspective. It's simply a betrayal to our people. That's how they saw it. Kins R Us, you're saying in the 2006 vote, how glad are the West Bankers that didn't vote for Hamas? Well, Hamas is more popular than the PA in the West Bank, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe you could look at it like the grass is greener on the other side. You watch from afar their courageous resistance. You might support that. From within, you see the PA corruption and nothing to create a better situation on the ground and just collaborate with Israel, only for Israel to continue to expand, right? That's how many West Bank Palestinians may see it. If you're a Gazan Palestinian, you look at the destruction Hamas invited in, and you know the courageous resistance is not something you're taking pride in when your family's been killed. And then you see the stable PA who's, life in the West Bank's better than Gaza. So the PA is more popular than Hamas in Gaza, but Hamas is more popular than the PA in the West Bank. That's interesting. Oh, okay. I have my call now. Wait, let's see if he's ready. Oh, never mind. My call's in an hour. Okay. Do I have an hour of steam, though? Palliser says, it doesn't matter to you personally. You're a Palestinian Christian dating a Thai Buddhist. Cool. Good for you. Is your family okay with that? Do they support it? And did they support it? If they do support it now, did they support it initially? Oh, Ken RS, you're saying there's Korean food, Japanese food, Indian food. I love Thai food. Actually, so Thai food is probably my favorite cuisine as well. Though you say has to be the Thai green curry. That's not my go-to. Don't love, like, I enjoy a curry, but that's not my go-to. But yeah, Thai food. Such complex flavor profiles. The umami, little sweet, little sour, salty. Yeah, it's just got it all. Just got it all. Okay, Ahmed, other Ahmed in Discord is saying us that my brother is married to Shia, so it's silly. So in your family, it doesn't matter. Okay. Not Tennessee. Asians are actually also Neanderthal. I often notice a racialized view of these humanoid interbreeding events, especially in the West, like you just did. Asians are actually also Neanderthal. Is that right? That, but why is that a racialized? Because I say Caucasians or white people are Neanderthal, but Asians are not. I don't know if that's racializing it, just repeating what I thought was our understanding of genetics. I've always seen it cited as, I see Nathan, you're not even here, so we'll need to talk about it another time. But I mean, I guess it makes sense that not only Caucasians would have that DNA, but we could look it up. You know what's interesting though? It's not even technically pronounced Neanderthal. It's technically Neanderthal, but no one says that. It's because they were found initially in the Neanderthal Valley. So you know that sounds good. Okay, so it's saying Neanderthal DNA is not exclusive to Caucasians, though it is most common in people of non-African ancestry. Europeans and Asians, including South Asians, East Asians, and Native Americans, typically have around 1 to 2%. Okay, you're right, not a ton. Yes, interesting. So nearly all non-African populations have Neanderthal DNA, huh? But more so Caucasians, and then Denisovan DNA. Whoa. Populations from Oceania, especially Papua New Guinea, Malaysia, Australia, and parts of Southeast Asia, have the highest Denisovan ancestry, 5 to 6%. That's crazy. So yeah, it's not a simple split white Neanderthal, Asian, Denisovan, but there's heavier distribution in each population with some mixing. That makes sense. Palliser says, my family's cool with it. They love my girlfriend, and we're in New Jersey. We've Americanized. Haha. Yeah, I mean, it's easier when you're Americanized, right? Middle Eastern culture is a little tougher, you know, a little bit more closed and traditional. One area we've seen a positive shift is in the intermarrying between Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews, where the majority of the younger generation are now mixed. That only took a few generations. So that's cool. I wonder what about Ethiopian Jews, if how they're mixing with non-Ethiopian Jews. But even there, like an Ethiopian Jew, their parents, for the most part, are going to want them to marry an Ethiopian. I think that's going to be the hope. I don't think this is uncommon. This probably exists in most cultures. By the way, pal, sir, where in New Jersey do you live? What area? You don't need to give me your address, but area would be cool. Because I grew up in North Jersey, in Randolph, small little suburban town. Small little suburban town where everything should just be great, yet everyone got addicted to drugs. So how does that happen, right? I always talk about environmental conditions. It's almost like my mantra at this point, to a fault. But and for good reason. I think that should be the focus if we really want to make the world a better place, create conditions that make people the best versions of themselves. But it's not as simple as just having like a suburban upbringing, upper middle class. It's not enough, right? Because drugs decimate many of those neighborhoods, as it did my town. So it's not just like white picket fence, lawn, two parent household. I think all that's good and important and helps your chance of success, but there's something deeper. There's something more missing. It's not enough. It's just not enough. Ahmed says, what about rumors saying Ethiopian women got castrated for not bringing black Jew kids? That ruled a lot. No, I don't think that's true. I know there's some. I know that I've seen. I haven't looked in it, but it doesn't sound like something that would happen as a matter of policy. Like there was rumors that they were kidnapping Yemenite children and giving them to Ashkenazi families. Again, there's no evidence of that found upon investigation. Maybe you had individual doctors who were selling children, right? I could see that happening. Like a dirty doctor. Again, none of this as a matter of policy. Yeah. But also, I mean, Yemenites, of all the different Jewish groups, Yemenites look quite different. Well, I don't want to say, Ethiopians have a more distinct look, I would say, or look more different or easier to distinguish between like an Ashkenazi Jew and an Ethiopian. But Yemenite Jews look vastly different from Ashkenazi Jews and like Moroccan Jews. They're darker, generally shorter. So we just don't see a lot of white parents with Yemenite looking children, right? There's not like, but again, I mean, let's say this only happened 24 times. How much evidence of that would we then have? I don't know. I'm speculating. But it's not common to see white parents with a Yemenite child. And if there is, then that would be highly suspicious, I would say. But yeah, of all the Jews, like some Jews are easier to identify based on look than others, right? Ashkenazi Jews, there's generally a look to them, although there's a big mix. Yemenite Jews also look a little bit more Yemenite. Ethiopian Jews look a little bit more Ethiopian. Probably, though, indistinguishable from Ethiopians. Do we have any Ethiopian viewers? I'd be interested in knowing if there's a difference between how Ethiopian Jews look and just, I want to say your standard run-of-the-mill Ethiopia, but I know to speak so broadly about a different country is probably ignorant because even Ethiopia probably has a lot of different smaller groups, right? Especially Africa, which is thousands of different tribal groups that are sharing countries based on borders drawn by colonizers. So you're going to have probably a lot of diversity there. But Ethiopians have a distinct African look. Like they don't look like Nigerians or Ghanans, right? They have you could tell that they're from Ethiopia or maybe Eritrea, Eritrea. They have kind of a look that's identifiable. Now, I would go on to say that the only reason I'm saying this is because I've met enough Ethiopians that I could recognize them. I imagine probably every country, every group of people is recognizable by those who spend enough time with them. That's right. Like take two Romanians meet they're both in some random bar in Argentina. They very well might know that the other's Romanian just by looking at each other. And I use Romania as an example. This is probably true about every group. It's much easier to identify your own or those you're familiar with. It's kind of like how us whites, we think that all Asians look the same, but Asians think we look the same, That's just how it goes. And what, you think zebras can tell each other apart very easily by their stripes. When zebras look at us, they just see a bunch of like pale sticks running around, like these lanky things running around. Zebras can't differentiate between us. Ahmed says, you believe Ashkenazi Jews are real Jews? Well, it depends what you mean by real Jews. Do Ashkenazi Jews, are they descendants of ancient Israelites? Based on all the DNA evidence we have, yes, we see that almost all Jewish groups have Bronze Age Levantine DNA, some more than others. Ashkenazi Jews less than Persian Jews and Sephardi Jews, but Ashkenazi Jews, depending on the study, 20-30% Levantine DNA. So yeah, I don't think there's any reason to deny that. I know a lot of people try to deny it, but based on the evidence we have, we're descendants of ancient Israelites to some extent, as are Palestinians, by the way. But whether that's a real Jew or not is a different question. What makes a real Jew? Some might say I'm not a real Jew, because we're not just a religion, we're an ethno-religion, right? So, okay, I'm of the Jewish people, I'll always be of the Jewish people, right? I'll always be Jewish, despite me not believing in the Torah. Am I more of a real Jew than a convert who's not of our tribe, who has no connection, but they actually believe? Who's more of a real Jew? I don't have all too much of an opinion on this. Like, it's just not something I care about all too much. Just be a real person. That's what I care about. Are you a real person? Be real. Kitten says, I noticed Ethiopian Somalians have a look, but they look different. Like I could tell the difference between a Somalian and an Ethiopian. Ahmed says, by blood, I mean, so why there is some king who converted everyone to Judaism without any blood relations to it? I think you're talking about the Khazar theory, which is for the most part disproven. Or some king of Khazaria converted to Judaism along with their community, but that's not all Ashkenazis are the descendants of these people. Perhaps Jews in the Caucasus region, Chechnya, Dagestan. I don't even know how many Jews you have there these days, but Caucasus Jews very well may be descendants of the Khazars. And I think DNA tests show us that they have Khazarian blood, but the majority of Ashkenazi Jews are not the descendants of those people. Though perhaps we might have some of their blood as well. You need to think the history of Jews, it's thousands of years in exile, traveling to different countries, intermixing not only with local populations, but with Jews from our own town or from other towns. So it's kind of like the Neanderthal blood, right? It probably exists. Khazar DNA very likely might exist in other Ashkenazi populations, but that's not our primary like DNA makeup. It seems to be minor. Nor do we have evidence of like mass conversion leading to the Ashkenazi Jewish population. So Ahmed says, "You're Jew by blood, by faith. You're something else." Yeah, exactly. I accept that framing. Like my blood is Jewish enough that the Nazis would want to round me up. Right, because that's what Nazis cared about. They didn't care about your faith. They cared about your blood. They thought there was something wrong with their blood, with their genetic makeup. So blood-wise, I'm 99.8% Ashkenazi. So yeah, very Jewish. By faith, definitely something else. Yeah. Ken R. Us says, Adar, I thought you and your friends were amazing when helping your friend Alice. How often do you deal with the youths? Well, that was my first interaction doing some kind of protective presence. I don't know if you know the update, but then we found out that these guys, how much of the story do I want to get into? Okay, I'll say it briefly. We're at a month or two ago. There was a Palestinian-Israeli picnic. Sorry, not picnic. Camping trip in the West Bank. 200 Palestinians and Israelis came. It was amazing. While we were there, Alice, one of the organizers, noticed some settlers broke into her property and were stealing stuff. These are people who she's been dealing with for over a year now. They've had beef. We confronted them. The IDF came, the police came. Eventually, they said these guys need to put things back. They weren't arrested. They just had to put the stuff back. After that day, Alice reached out to me, said she wants to stop fighting with them, but she would rather find ways to build ties with them. I said, great, I love it. Let's do it. We set up a call with a few people who want to be involved in this project, where she was giving us some background, and she mentioned the ringleader, who is the man by the name of Lior Tal. And I recognize that name. Turns out it's a buddy of mine from my days in the IDF. So right after that call, I called Lior after not speaking to him in nearly 15 years. He answered. And he didn't mention anything about Alice. I just asked him how he's doing and told him I'd like to catch up. And he said, sure, come on by. So I went to his farm. And then when I saw him, I told him about Alice and tried to make peace and all that. And he's open to speaking to her, but it's not, there's a systemic issue that I don't think could be resolved just through conversation, because he's renting that land from the JNF, the Jewish National Fund. As far as he's concerned, he's following the law. He's paying for it. He's doing everything by the book. And then he has who he views as squatters, Alice and her family, tenants that refuse to leave, not allowing him to farm so he could provide for him and his family. That's his perspective on it, which it's not hard to see how you reach that perspective. He's following the law of the state. This is land that was raised hearing is his. Is that the correct perspective? Not in my opinion, but it's not hard to see how somebody reaches that perspective. So in his eyes, he's like, yeah, I don't hate Alice. It's nothing personal. I'm just trying to provide for me and my family. I'm paying for this land. I want to be able to work the land. So it's complicated, and it just shows how the system kind of pits people against each other in a sense. It's going to court. I don't have high hopes the court, it's not like the court is so fair in how they rule on these things generally, but we'll see what happens. And I'm still in the process of working with them and seeing if we can build better ties. Oh, but when I got to his farm, it was funny because it's like off the beaten path. So he sent someone to pick me up from the checkpoint, and I was hoping that it wasn't some of the kids that I confronted, because I didn't want them to roll up and then see me. And all of a sudden, they're picking up some lefty who confronted them. Like, that's how they see me. They see me as a traitor to the state, and now they're picking me up to bring me to their ringleader. It would confuse the fuck out of them, but I think my thought is if that happens, they'd call him, give away the surprise. Thankfully, somebody else showed up to pick me up. But when I was there on the farm, two of the kids did roll up in a buggy, and then they saw me, and they were shocked. They're like, "What is that guy doing here with our boss, with the community leader?" And then we quickly we calmed them down, told them that all good. We've been friends a long time. They still were not trusting of me. They didn't really warm up to me, but all good. Let's see. Khan ODs. Good to see you, Connor. Khazar theory has been debunked by many historians, scholars, and accredited individuals of the highest ranking universities. Yeah, yeah. I don't think there's much to the Khazar theory. Well, let's be clear. The theory saying all Ashkenazi Jews are descendants of Khazars has been widely debunked. Are there Caucasus Jews with Khazarian DNA? I think we know that to be true. So that hasn't been debunked. But this idea that Ashkenazi Jews just come from the Caucasus, that has been debunked, yeah. Ahmed says, to be honest with you, you're a nice person to talk to. Thank you. I appreciate that. You are too. But all I understand so far, Judaism is Zionism hostage when nationalism is over ethnicity. I'm not sure I understood what you're saying, but how do I explain the relationship between Zionism and Judaism? So when you think of Zionism, Ahmed, what you're seeing is what Zionism has meant to Palestinians, right? It's displacement, it's occupation, apartheid, genocide, right? All these human rights abuses that Palestinians have faced, that's Zionism to Palestinians and to supporters of Palestine. Jews who are Zionists, what they're seeing is none of that is necessary for Zionism. Zionism is simply us being able to live our lives on our land, our right to self-determination. Is that so much to ask for? All the violence and oppression that's come of it is simply a response of Palestinians rejecting our right to self-determination. Right? That would be the Zionist perspective on Zionism. So most Jews being Zionists, it's simply saying, yeah, of course I support a Jewish state. Why wouldn't I? A state that I believe is providing safety to half of the world's Jews sounds like a good idea. That's for the most part how Jews see Zionism. So they're not focusing on the bad. They think the bad is simply a result of Zionism being rejected. For them, it's just Jewish self-determination. While Palestinians are understandably viewing Zionism through the lens of what it has meant to them. Kittens says, bless you, Adar. It was best so violence doesn't break out, but I don't understand who legally owns land, the deeds. I honestly, speaking to Leor and Alice, I could not get to a full understanding of the legal matter. They have completely different versions of the legal standing. I could not make sense of it. The JNF seems to have the rights, the deeds to the land. How they got that, I'm not sure. Did they get that in a fair and honest way? Who knows? Did Alice's family ever have deeds to the land, or have they just been living there for many generations? Right. A lot of the lands that Palestinians lost are not lands that they ever held the deed to. Land ownership for most of history was not, here's the deed, this is my land. It's you live on a land, you work a land. Functionally, it's your land. That's how Palestinians existed on the land for centuries, millennia. During the Ottoman era, around the 1850s, they started perhaps privatizing land, we want to say, and giving the deeds either to those living on it or to noblemen and other wealthy people as gifts. So, for example, you could be some higher up in the Ottoman government, and you are granted a land deed in Palestine. On this land, you have farmers living and working. They will pay you rent. So the farmer's like, okay, this is us paying our tax to work the land. Functionally, they still see it as theirs. We've lived here for generations. We work it. It's our livelihood, and we will pay some rent. And then generations later, Zionists and Zionist organizations purchased some of the land from the descendants of these deed holders and removed the people living there. So I think we have something similar dynamic. One is, on one hand, Jews saying, yeah, this is legal. We bought it. It's ours now. We're following the law. We're doing this as it should be. And Palestinians saying, what do you mean you bought it? How can you buy it? It's mine. I've been living here. Why should I now need to leave just so you can move in? That's, I think, the tension we've been seeing. And I get the sense it's similar today, that Alice, I don't know if her family ever had the deeds to the land, but they've lived there for generations. They've run businesses from the land. And now they're not homeless. They have another place to live, but they don't have any financial means anymore. And they had to move. They can't access it anymore. They are both, Alice and her family are confident that the court will rule in their favor, though. So that's interesting and worth saying. I guess we'll see. But yeah, I'm going to go back soon. Connor says, is the war really over? We started the live stream talking about this. Hard to know, but there's a good chance it's not. But at least the hostages are getting out. But Jews, so Ahmed, you go, but Jews were living 1,400 years in Muslims land without any problems and didn't even have to fight and got security. Yes and no. Jews were second-class citizens. We weren't equal to Muslims when living under Muslims. So the relationships between neighbors seems to have been good, that we were living side by side, all good, but we were not in the same status as Muslims. We were in a lower status, and then we had to pay a special jizya, special tax. It was better than Europe, right? Better to be a Jew in the Middle East than in Europe for most of existence, but it was not a situation where Jews should feel comfortable going back to. It's not, you can't point to the situation in Ottoman era and say, this is a great situation. Could you make the case that, and the Ottoman era was the Ottoman Empire was reforming and creating better, more equitable systems and stronger institutions. This was a process they were going through until they collapsed. You could argue that had there not been Zionism, that eventually equality would have been achieved. We could speculate on that, but there's no country in the Middle East that has great minority rights. So that can't all be attributed to Zionism. And the whole idea that Jews can just be a minority in the Middle East and their life will be great, there's no reason to actually believe that. Certainly not now, not after so long of conflict. So I think there's a little bit of revisionism there. Now, it wasn't as bad as some Zionists will make it out to be. They make it out to be like a Jew living in the Middle East was like living in a ghetto. They were constantly abused and harassed and pogromed. That wasn't the reality, but it was far from perfect. Kittens says, I thought there were no checkpoints until Second Intifada, as Israel is number one on global terrorism index scale, which puts Israel a great need to put security checkpoints. I'm not sure. I was young. Were there no checkpoints until the Second Intifada? I'd need to look into that. I will say this, though. Countries have a right to protect their people and to protect their border. Okay, so if Israel has a checkpoint to come in and out of Israel, that's legitimate. That's something I believe all countries have a right to do and should do. But a lot of the checkpoints Palestinians wait at are within the West Bank, and they exist simply because simply for our security apparatus needing to exist in the West Bank. It's not border security. It's security within the West Bank. It's around settlements. Uh, it creates a situation where Palestinians cannot travel from city to city within the West Bank without checkpoint, without being subject to potentially a search, a car search, etc. So if the only checkpoints that existed were on the Israel-Palestine border, great. If someone wants to complain about that, they can, but fuck them, right? Like their opinion doesn't matter at that point. But that's not the same as all the checkpoints that are within the West Bank. That just impact the Palestinians' ability to live their lives. Now, it's not just call it an annoyance of needing to wait longer to travel. There's a psychological toll that we can't discount. Living under the rule of a military that is not your own people takes a psychological toll on people. It's just not a healthy dynamic. When there's these people that are not accountable to you, they're not you, you have no representation, no representative that can do anything about it. You have no course of action you can take if there's some abuse happening. These are the people that rule over you, right? That it's just such a problematic dynamic, which I think in any instance where that will occur, it will create a situation where you hate your ruler, right? You hate the people who are controlling you, unless you're just overwhelmingly having positive interactions with them, right? If the IDF was seen as a protector of Palestinians in the West Bank, then then they very well may have a different. But the second there's this external oppressive force that controls you, that's just a radicalizing force. That's certainly an environmental condition that leads to radicalization. Yoni lived once. When did Jews live under Muslims? For most of our history, we live. Well, that's not true. Islam, I guess our history is 4,000 years. Islam's 1,400. So can't say most of our history, but most of the past 1,000+ years, Jews have lived all throughout the Middle East and North Africa under Muslim rule. There's still some Jews in the Middle East living under Muslim rule. There's also a few Muslim European countries that I imagine probably have some Jewish population. Kano Dees says, my grandfather was born in Libya as a Jew, eventually came to Israel as a teenager. For my family history can confirm he and his parents faced a lot of persecution from Arab neighbors. Interesting. So this is not even from the state, you're saying from actual neighbors. Do you have examples, like what kind of issues they face? Ahmed saying the IDF has never been seen as a protector. Well, I mean, Israelis view them as a protector, primarily Jewish Israelis. The IDF is revered in Israeli society. We strongly believe that without the IDF, we will be genocided. It's true that the IDF to Palestinians has always been an oppressive force, for sure, which I think is one of the easiest things we can change in the dynamic in the West Bank is to change the security presence there from IDF to a peacekeeping force of Israelis and Palestinians that both people can view as a protector. I think let that be our first shared institution. I think it's a beautiful institution to build that can actually have a meaningful impact. Ahmed, what country are you living in? You're saying in my country, most Jews live where nothing ever happens and will ever happen. Well, where are you living? Just so we could have a little more context. Ahmed, so you're in Tunisia. How many Jews still live in Tunisia? I don't know if you could say many Jews are living there. Let's see. I mean, 1,500 Jews living in Tunisia, my guy. It's not a century ago, in the 20s and 30s, the population was 50,000. So it went from 50,000 to 1,500. Now, the decline very well could just be caused by Zionism. They're like, oh, we have our own state we could live in. But I know that if you look at minority groups, there's been a decline all across the Middle East, not just Jews. So it's pretty consistent across the board. Let's see. French colonial period. Under French rule, Tunisian Jews gained civil rights, education, and upward mobility. World War II and Nazi occupation. Tunisia was briefly occupied. So the establishment of Israel led to anti-Jewish riots in Tunisia. Okay, so this is actually, let me make the case for Zionism real quick, which y'all won't hear me make too often. But so after the creation of the state of Israel, there was violence against Jews in the Middle East and North Africa as a response. Now, you can say, oh, well, that's just in response to Zionism, but that actually doesn't matter what it's in response to. The fact that Jews living in Tunisia, Morocco, Iraq, wherever they may have been, can get turned on by their neighbors or their government because of what other Jews are doing many miles away speaks to the fact that that's a minority group that is not really well protected. It means that their place in society is fragile and they're not safe. So while you could say that Jews were more welcome in Middle Eastern and let's say in the MENA region until Zionism, you can make that case. I think that's an easily defensible case, but it doesn't prove that Jews were safe in those countries. Because if they were truly safe, Zionism wouldn't have put them in danger. If they were truly safe, their neighbors would not have held that against them. And if some extremists held that against them, then the other neighbors or governments would step in and stop it. Right? So the fact that the response to Zionism was uprisings across the Middle East and North Africa is a sign that their place in society was not as safe as many like to frame it as. Danny, which chat am I reading from? Yeah, YouTube. Reading from YouTube chat. I will do like 5 more minutes and then I'll get ready for my call. Yalda Tova. That's a cute name. Is saying Jews were not safe in Muslim Iraq, even though they lived there for centuries before Islam ever existed. Correct. There were uprisings in Iraq as well. Ken says, to be honest, I think people are financially security better off under Israeli citizenship. If you look at Israeli city of Haifa, 10% Arab, Muslim, Jews, Christians, all with Israeli. No, Haifa is more than 10% Palestinian or Arab Israeli, depending on what you want to refer to them as. I think it's probably closer to 50%. But yeah, that's something that many Zionists argue, right? That the life for Palestinians in Israel, or they don't call them Palestinians, they're Israeli Arabs, right? It's a mixed isn't even the right word. It's a complicated identity. 20% of Israel's population are a group of people who in Israel we call them Israeli Arabs. In Israeli society, most of these Israeli Arabs also refer to them as Israeli Arabs. When you actually talk to them, many of them also, though, do still identify as Palestinian. Some identify primarily as Palestinian, but also Israeli. Some as Palestinian and reject their Israeli identity, and vice versa, right? Some are Israeli and have no connection to Palestinian identity. So Israeli Arabs / Palestinian citizens of Israel, depending on who you ask and who you're talking about, but that's 20% of Israel's population. And they do live, this also differs from neighborhood to neighborhood, but on average, they're living some of the best lives in the Middle East. That's true. And a lot of them would not want to, they don't identify as Zionists, but a lot of them would not want the state of Israel to be dismantled. They wouldn't rather live in the West Bank. They're happy with their lives. That's true. And I think we could acknowledge that. But normally this is brought up as like a means of whitewashing, whereas like somebody will say apartheid describing what's happening in the West Bank, and they're like, what about all the Arab doctors? But that's just a deflection. That's not what we're talking about when we talk about the West Bank. There we're talking about a two-tiered system, one for citizens, Jewish Israeli citizens, and the other for Palestinians. So it's fine to acknowledge that. And if somebody wants to use that to make the case that it should be one state from the river to the sea, it should be Israel, but everyone should get citizenship, great, then make that case. But this isn't the case that should be used to cover up real human rights abuses. So pay attention to how that conversation is brought up and for what purpose. Kano D says Abu Hassan hummus in Jaffa is very good. It's great. Some of the best in the world. Joe Wilder says, is there a parallel between Zionism and the Hindu nationalism in India? And do you have a favorable view of it? I don't know all too much about Hindu nationalism, so I can't comment on this. I do think, though, that you look at all the countries in the world who are either pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, it seems like India is one of the more pro-Israel countries. But I think it's probably because we share a common enemy, which is Muslims. I think that's how they view it. They're like, oh, we're both fighting Muslims, so we must be on the same side. Maybe that's overly simplistic, but that was my understanding of why Indians are very supportive of Israel. Yeah, a lot of what's funny on Twitter, a lot of the big accounts are Indians and Pakistanis pretending to be either Palestinian or Israeli. So the India-Pakistan war also takes place on Twitter, both sides cosplaying as either Israelis or Palestinians. It's interesting. And by the way, what I just said is the reason why a lot of people support Israel over Palestine. It's not a principled understanding of human rights uh, and who's more responsible for violating human rights, etc., and this and that. It's simply like I prefer Jews over Muslims, or I think the Jewish state is good. Look what they've look. It's a Western state, technologically advanced, all this innovation. Uh, they're they're far more secular than other Middle Eastern countries. I support this country. If this country needs to kill people or violate rights to survive, I support that. Right? I think that's where a lot of the pro-Israel support comes from. It's simply preferring Jews over Muslims or preferring Israel over what they believe Palestine would be, and so they're just gonna get in the be in the pro-Israel camp. Um, and it happens on both sides as well, right? I would say a lot of like anti-Semites generally gravitate to being pro-Palestine for similar reasons. Though anti-Semites who don't want Jews in the West should have every interest in there being a strong Jewish state, not in the West, for Jews to move to. Because if Israel is dismantled, it means that the West is going to have a lot more Jews in it. And so it's interesting. You'd think more anti-Semites would support a strong Israel. But perhaps they don't like Israel's perceived influence over Western countries, and that's what they're concerned about. KB says hello, Adar in chat. Hey, KB, welcome. Why Ahmed saying why do they just call them Israelis? Why calling them Israeli Arabs? The world sees Israel as an apartheid state. I don't think this is unique, and maybe it not being unique doesn't mean it's not okay. Maybe there shouldn't be a distinction. But you say Black Americans, Mexican Americans, uh, Chinese Americans. I think this is generally used to describe all minority groups, right? If you're of the majority group, you're just American or Israeli. If you're a minority within that society, then you get some title differentiating you. But I don't think that's why people say it's an apartheid. Ahmed says, but my friend, it ain't your country's own technology. It's American. Without USA, there is no Israel on the long scale. Well, I think we're talking about two different things. You're talking about the funding we get and our weapons. But in terms of innovation, I mean, Israel has produced the most billion-dollar companies per capita, I believe, in the world. A lot of big tech companies coming out of Israel. So there's a lot of technology that actually comes from Israel that's used globally that you can't boycott even if you wanted to, because it's just part of everyday items. So in that sense, if you're a Western, you're like, why would I want Israel to be destroyed? They're a Western democracy. They you know they're innovating in a way that's helping out the whole world. Why would I support a primitive Middle Eastern culture over that? Right? That's how many Western supporters of Israel view it. Which I think it's even understandable how you could reach that conclusion. You don't care about the human rights. It's like that's your big picture. Like, okay, if a bunch of Muslims need to be killed, they need to be killed, right? That's how they see it. If you don't care about each individual, and you just see these as others, an other group, who you view as different from you or your enemy or a threat to you, then you're going to support the force fighting them. You don't care much about the details, civilian to combatant ratio, the real death toll. This just doesn't interest you. You just want Israel, which you believe to be a force of good, to survive, and Palestine, which you think is a force of bad, to fail. I think that's how they look at it. Connor's saying, "Do I think anti-Semitism in America right now is at a fever pitch, or is it overblown?" No, I think it's I don't think it's overblown. I think it's. I am not sure if at any time in history there's been a higher rate of anti-Semitism than there is now. Though I say this with some, at least in the U.S. Let's see. I mean, you had a period where Jews were persecuted in the U.S. to some degree, like not allowed to work in all industries. But in terms of the population, if you poll the U.S. population and you identify anti-Semitic sentiment, it might be all-time high. It might be. Wouldn't surprise me if it is. Now, you could argue, is it overblown? I don't think the extent of it is overblown. You could argue that the threat of it is overblown. So the question is, what is the actual implications of this anti-Semitism? How does it manifest itself in the real world? What is the consequence we pay for this anti-Semitism? I think all that is unclear, but it's possible that that's overblown, that there's a lot of negative sentiment, but it doesn't really impact us in noticeable ways. Although I mentioned earlier how, the inoccupation takes a psychological toll. So this is probably the greatest toll that anti-Semitism in its current form will take on Jews, is the psychological toll, this idea feeling hated by many people. I imagine most Jews living in the West are not going to be attacked or persecuted for being Jewish, but there'll be a psychological toll to the prevalence, as a result of the prevalence of anti-Semitism. Not so. Oedipus says right-wing anti-Semitism is growing rapidly with much intellectual impact on MAGA movement behind the scenes and not so behind the scenes. Yeah, well, that's for sure. It's definitely become normalized. I think Nick Fuentes was pretty successful. It's not just Nick Fuentes, though. It's, Twitter giving a lot of these voices a platform. It's Israel's relationship to the U.S. All this contributes to it. It's meme culture, right? It's very easy to meme conspiracies about Jews and stuff. But look, I think it's actually the form of anti-Semitism that is easiest to sympathize with, I think, is actually right-wing anti-Semitism. It's of all the forms of anti-Semitism, the one that, in my opinion, I don't want to say makes the most sense. It's still you're still reaching flawed conclusions, but it's the easiest to understand how one reaches that conclusion. So if you're concerned with the direction of the United States, and then you see a situation where, if you look at what is contributing to the direction of the US, whether it's Hollywood and the woke bullshit they put out, whether it's the financial institutions that, are unfair and ripping off the people, whether it's the porn industry and hookup culture, whether it's money in politics, these are all things that Jews are overrepresented in. Hollywood, media, finance, porn, I said hookup culture because like dating apps as well. We're not the majority in any of these industries, but we're overrepresented. We play a very influential role in these industries. We also play an influential role in industries that are just less interesting, like construction and Nobel Prizes and charity. But that's not what sticks. That's not what people are looking at. They're saying, I don't like our financial institutions. I don't like our media. I don't like Hollywood. I don't like prevalence of porn. And then Jews are involved in all these industries. So if you're a white Christian conservative in America and you want what's best for your country, it's not hard to reach the conclusion that the presence of Jews in society are pulling the country in the wrong direction. That's how right-wing anti-Semites see it. So if you reach that conclusion, it gives you a grievance with this group, this small group of people who are insular, who have disproportionate power, are pulling the country in the wrong direction. I would say that's a pretty fair steel manning of right-wing anti-Semitism, which I think is the form of anti-Semitism which is, again, the most compelling perhaps. It's still not the right way to look at it for a few reasons. One, as I mentioned, we're overrepresented in many industries, yet we're not the majority in any of these industries. Two, this is not an individual problem. It's, as I talk about with Israel-Palestine, it's a systemic issue. If there's individuals that are able to work within the system and pull society in a certain direction, change the system, don't focus on the individuals. Three, even if you strongly believe that Jews in society are making society worse, well, sucks for you. You live in society with other people. You need to deal with other people disagreeing with you and wanting to pull society in their direction. So that's for you not to be salty about, but to work, build ties with those populations and find a way to build a society together. So I think it's still a flawed conclusion, but it's quite understandable how people reach that conclusion. Like then there's left-wing anti-Semitism, which is more, I think, rooted in power dynamics and powerful versus weak. And then there's Muslim anti-Semitism, I know, as a category, which I think is mostly theological, which is, you got to get over that stuff. Ahmed says the word anti-Semitism is itself lost its value. Yeah, I agree. It's so weaponized and overused. Legitimate criticism of Israel is called anti-Semitic, so people don't take accusations of anti-Semitism seriously, for sure. For sure. Those who have weaponized anti-Semitism have contributed to anti-Semitism more than many Jew haters out there. It's time to rein it in and start having a different conversation about this. Okay, I got my call now. Cool. Signing off. We're gonna continue this in. Whoever wants to, we'll do an after party in Discord. I dropped a link in chat. There's a link in my bio on Twitter or in the description on this video. Join the Discord on the left-hand side. It's gonna say chill room. Click on the chill room, and the conversation will continue. You don't need to speak. You can just listen, but it's in a good crew. Israelis, Palestinians, voices around the world. Good people, all in all. And thank you all for tuning in. When will be the next stream? Maybe Sunday. Maybe Sunday or Monday. We'll see. We'll do something fun. Have a beautiful weekend, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Juma Mubarak. Sending love from the Western Galilee in the beautiful land of Israel and Palestine. Until next time, friends.